This show is part of the HeadStuff Podcast Network. This week's guest is Tracy from the Midlands, and she is a gas character. She has some amount of stories from years of trying to find a normal fella, and some of the things that she has been through are shocking and hilarious. I had a good laugh listening to her during this, so if you've ever been on a bad date or wondered if all of the good, decent men have disappeared, you're going to enjoy this one. Yeah, you were very good to come on. I had done a kind of like an outreach or whatever video to ask just people who were out there who were willing to come on the podcast and chat about their experiences, and your friend said you were the woman to talk to.
Yes, Aoife Scully. She does a bit on TikTok herself there. You know, the TikTok shop and that and stuff. So she said, "Oh, Tracy," because I was dying to do this for years, but I had no real platform to do it on. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was always a running joke, "Oh, you'll write a book one day about it," you know, like your experiences. So yeah, I'm delighted as well.
About all your dates. Well, happy days. I'm delighted I'm the one that's hearing it.
All my mishaps.
Take it from the top.
Nobody died. That's the main things to do in the whole thing. So.
Well, that's it.
And the funny thing is, I was in Dublin at the weekend. I have started chatting to a French man, and he came over from Paris at the weekend, and I spent the last 4 days with him. Yeah, so, and I'm talking about going over to Paris again. I didn't go. He came over, so I'm talking about going over to him in the June bank holiday. So yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Fair play to you. Sorry, you spent the last 4 what with him?
4 days. He came over on Good Friday and we got washed out of it in Dublin. He came over Good Friday and Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and he went back on Tuesday mornings. So yeah, so it's looking good.
Jesus, 4 days in a row. Fucking fair play to you. Washed out is right.
Washed out. Met him on Tinder, and I just said to him, "Look, I'm not," because the Swedish guy is in here as well. I've it all written down, girl. I was working on it the last few days, and the Swedish guy is in here. And I texted him for about 6 months. And I said, "Listen here now, I am not texting anyone for 6 months. You can come over if you want." So he came over, fair play to him, yeah. But he used to have an Irish girlfriend. He's very good at English. He was a businessman for years. He still is a businessman, but working for himself. And he was back and forth to Ireland all the time. So he knows Tullamore, he knows Burr, he knows Athlone, he knows Ireland better than I do, like, so.
And come here now, if it works out, are you thinking that little move to Paris?
Maybe. Well, you have to fly into Paris, you've no way around it. But he lives up north near Lille, near Belgium, would you believe? So
nice.
Yeah.
Very exciting stuff. Well, sure, give us one of these bad dates.
Yeah, okay. So about 20 years ago, I was living in Sydney, Australia, and I was on a pub crawl in the city for St. Patrick's Day. I was down in the old Shamrock there with my Irish friends. So in one of the Irish pubs, I met a really nice guy from Northern Ireland. He was very funny and we really hit it off. We were having a great crack, and when my mate said we were moving on to another pub, I was devastated. Although I would rather have stayed with your man, I didn't want to get parted from me friends, so I left him in the pub with his friends. So I didn't see him after that. I looked out for him for the rest of the day, and not sure Sydney, how big is Sydney? Not a Scooby-Doo, nothing from him. I was devastated anyway. And I didn't see him after that, and I was fierce disappointed. So a few days later, I couldn't get him out of my head. He was so nice and really good looking. And I asked one of my friends from Northern Ireland if she had heard of the guy. So she said, "Leave it with me." And about 2 or 3 weeks later on it, she came back to me, would you believe, with a phone number, because it's a very small community, you know, when you know the right people. So anyways, I was delighted. I was like, God, this has to be fate. And I rang him and we arranged to meet in the city centre. So we had a brilliant night, and he told me that he was so happy that I'd found his phone number, that was meant to be, that we met up again, you know. And of course, needless to say, I was smitten. So when he asked me back to his apartment, I jumped at the chance. By the time I got back to his place, though, it had been a long night now, and my feet were killing me. They were absolutely killing me. And all I wanted to do was to sit down and take off my sandals and chill on his sofa, you know. So without saying anything, I went towards the sitting room. And my date, I can't remember his name, he said, Jesus, no, we'll stay in the kitchen. We'll stay in the kitchen of an apartment, quite small kitchen. I was like, Jesus, I was so tired that I again suggested we moved to the sitting room. And I thought it would be romantic as well.
Yeah, Jesus.
So
Yeah.
me date jumped up and he hurled himself against the door shouting, I told you not to go in there. Well, says I to myself, that lad is a woman in there, and me entertaining him all night. Like I said, feck this now. I was
Oh my
raging. I was
God.
like, what's going on here? I smelt a rat. And I said, I waited until he went to the toilet. And I ran over to open the sitting room door. And when I opened the sitting room door, I gasped. And the sitting room was full of suitcases, surfboards, bags, boxes, boots, balls, hurleys, the whole lot. 3:00, I had a few drinks in me. I was bare feet at this stage and I was just looking. I was wrecked and I was going, what is going on here? And so I got him out of the toilet anyway and I said to him, what the hell is going on in your sitting room? So he kind of looked at me and he looked at the sitting room and he looked back to me and rather sheepishly he said, oh, Jesus, yeah, in his Northern Ireland accent, I forgot me and the lads are moving to Queensland in the morning. And I was like, yeah, what? I meant to tell you, he says he.
Oh
And I
my
was just like,
God.
when were you going to tell me, like, you know, after I'd stayed the night, like. So he was literally flying out the next morning with all his friends. And he telling me a few hours before that, oh, this was meant to be and we were meant to be together and we, you know.
Stop the lights. He was getting one final ride in before he moved.
Absolutely. Now you've said it. So absolutely, till he moved on to the birds in Queensland or whatever. So I was rage balls and I was ringing for a taxi and there was none available for like an hour. And I was in the middle of nowhere. I had not a clue of that part of the city. Like I was so used to Ashfield and Burwood where, you know, where all my friends were. And there wasn't a thinner about or whatever. So I was so raging that I went out and my feet were killing me at this stage. I had blisters and everything. So I just stood outside. I wouldn't even stay in the apartment. I stood outside. I was raging and I had to wait for ages for a taxi. Sure, I couldn't walk anywhere. My feet were killing me. And I didn't know anyone. There was nobody to give you a lift, not like here in Ireland, you know, like. So that was my Australian adventure, like. So
Yeah.
that's number one. That's number one. Number two, then so a few years ago, I met a big strapping guy from Duhoma, Mayo. I met him online. We were just texting as he would never take phone call, only leave voice messages. Well, that really should have been the first red flag, neon flag, but sure, no, Tracy goes in there. He'd asked me out to go on a date in Tullamore and he'd cancelled a load of times. So at this stage now, I was getting a bit peed off with him. I asked if I could meet him that weekend at the Bridge House Hotel in Tullamore, just for a cup of tea or whatever, you know, nothing else. And he said he would. The morning of the date, I was out for a walk, I'll never forget. He left a voice message saying that he had to cancel our date as his dad had died unexpectedly. So I immediately said to him, oh, Jesus, take your time. And if I don't hear back from you again, I'll understand, you know. So, well, a few days later, anyways, I didn't hear anything. So a few days later, he started to text me, telling me that he was at the wake in his mother's house and that his son had special needs and that there wasn't a dry eye in the house as the granddad, so aka his dad, would play a game with the young boy of pretending that he was asleep and then he would go, whoa, and wake up. This was obviously when he was alive, you know. He was, whoa. And so naturally enough, he said that his son was on top of his granddad and said, wake up, granddaddy, wake up, granddaddy. But that obviously granddaddy wasn't going to wake up because he was dead. He said that he was helping out his mother and that he would probably stay in Duhoma for a few days after the funeral and he would return home then to Kilbeggan. So that was grand. I thought nothing more of it, all very above board. A few days later, I got a WhatsApp from him. And what was it? Only a dick pic. So, Jesus, I was shocked. I was like, Jesus, no. And I was like, sure, why did he send that? He was meant to be mourning his dad's death, like, you know. And how could he send me a dick pic? I said to him, I texted him and I said, I know, I left a voice message. I said to him, I don't care what the circumstances are. That's so disrespectful. And I'm not into that at all. It was so out of context as we'd been talking about the funeral and how devastating it was and everything. So the next morning, I went to bed quite cross and that was it. I cleaned them off. The next morning, I woke up and I was literally blocked on every platform. WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, gone. I was so put out that he had, first of all, sent the pic while he was in mourning, and then that he had blocked me. So I was raging at this stage. Now, I'd recently been on a string of rather bad dates, and I was really sick of men's antics in general at this stage. So I decided to investigate the matter, and I asked my friend to message him on Facebook. And maybe he might tell the truth, whatever, However, he totally ignored her. So I decided a more robust form of investigation was in order. And I thought about it for a while. And I said, here, I knew he was from Duhoma in Mayo, which is a small village. So I looked up the local pub, the first one I could find, and I rang them. And a big, thick, ignorant barman, he answered the phone. And I just must have asked, about him or whatever, And your man said, I'm not telling you anything about that man. How dare you ring looking for information? Go way out of that. So he basically ran me on the phone and I was morto, But I was still rage balls. The rage balls was higher than the morto. So I said to myself, I'm not getting anywhere here. And I went back to basics and I looked up the local funeral parlour. And a nice old lady answered the phone. And I said, hello, how are you? I'm just wondering when the funeral of, you see, I don't remember your man's name now, but it's just as well. So we call him Mr. Pat Brown. So I said, do you know when the funeral took place of Mr. Pat Brown, or indeed did he die at all? Because at this stage I smell a gigantic rat, to be honest now. Well, she thought for a minute and she answered, no, I don't really know what you're talking about because he cycled past here yesterday on his bike. So I'd say he's live. And I was like, oh my God. So I put the phone down. I went back to my friend and I said, give me your phone. I said, never mind texting, give me your phone. So I got him on Facebook and well, by Jesus, did I get onto his Facebook and I messaged him and I told him the whole story. I told him everything I'd done, probably rather foolishly, but I told him anyways, and what I'd found out. And needless to say, he was livid. He was rage buzz. I told him the whole of Duhoma would know what he'd done. I said, your dad did not die. I've that in capital. Did not die. He's alive and kicking.
Good.
And he was rage balls. He was so cross. And, me. He said, how dare you do that to me? And I said, how dare you do it to me? You invented a whole scenario of your dad dying just to get out of going on a date with me. I said, I don't care if you're married or you have 20 children or whatever.
What a fucking weirdo.
To go that far to say that, you could have said your dog died. That would have been bad enough, but your dad, that was date number 2.
That's absolutely outrageous. How dare he lie about his father? Imagine the father finding out that this fella is just willy-nilly, oh yeah, my dad's dead there, have to go to the wake, and going to the lengths of lying, telling all these stories to back it up about the child and not a dry eye in the house.
And the mother was she was like, what am I going to do? And he lived so far away. He lived in Kilbeggan. He was an accountant, had a really good job, really upstanding. Wasn't gorgeous, wasn't whatever. It's your personality at the end of the day that I'd be going for. And that made him so unattractive, And if he had 5 dates arranged and he was telling 5 different women across the country that his dad died, that's a lot of funerals he has to go to,
The dick pic then is what a fucking dope of a man to be lying about talking about his father's funeral. I know the dad wasn't actually dead, but in the middle of that conversation then pulling his flute out.
And then because I challenged him on it, because I was we hadn't even met, and because I challenged him on it, whatever he was going to get out of it, he didn't get the expected result. And because I was so cross, that then to block me. That's so he probably does that to a lot of women.
Well, yeah, probably. You called him out on it and then he blocked you because you were no good to him if you weren't loving his dick pic.
I didn't fall at his feet and give him the glory that he expected. So that was the outcome then. And he didn't think that I would go and investigate. He didn't think I was mad enough to do it so. He shouldn't have told me where he's from.
He met his match there, I tell you.
Anyway, I went on a date with a mechanic called Patrick from the Midlands. So during the day, I asked Patrick a question and he replied, my name's not Patrick. I tell all the women on Tinder that my name's Patrick, but it isn't. And he proceeded to tell me that he wouldn't tell me his real name until the second date. So I said, really? You think there's going to be I said this to myself, he thinks there's going to be a second date and he's after lying about the most basic thing, your most precious thing about you is your name. Do you know what I mean? That's what distinguishes you. The very first thing you say to someone is your name. And he didn't even tell me the truth. So I said, red flag. And I made my excuses to go, So the date really, we weren't there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. So anyway, I couldn't get out of there quick enough. And I sped off, got into my little Peugeot at the time, I think it was, and I sped off. Now, he didn't live too far from me on the scale of things. And I had relations down near him. So if I really wanted, I could have found out his name. But anyways, I knew that he wasn't gone too far down the road. I went this way and he went that way. So I was speeding off anyway in my little car. And as I drove along, I heard a strange noise coming out of the car. And I was like, oh shit. And I began to get scared. And in a panic, I rang Patrick. Because after all, he was a mechanic. Right? I didn't really want to ring him, but anyway. So Patrick answered the phone and I said, Patrick, there's this, I don't know, I think it's a flat tire. There's a wobble or a noise or something coming out the car. And I said, I don't know what to do. Can you come and have a little look? So Patrick thought about it for a minute and he said, pull into the side of the road, you'll be grand. I have to go. And he hung up on me. So I was like, right, there's definitely not going to be a second date there anyways, you know. And I made it near enough to my house, but not fully. So I pulled into a spot near the local graveyard, which, when you're wearing runners, is a 15-minute walk at the best of times. And I wouldn't be that fit even back then. And to make matters worse, this is to my house, to make matters worse, I was wearing that black dress I was telling you about, high heel shoes and no coat. And at this stage now, it was nigh on 11 p.m. and it was getting cold. So I was kind of standing there outside the car going, what am I going to do? Small little village I live in. There wouldn't be many people at night time. I'd say they'd be all in their beds, you know. So I flagged down a passing car. The car was stuffed full of young people. And a young fella pulled down the window, you know. And I said to him, Jesus, can you help me? Is my tyre flat? Does that look like it's flat? Like, you know, can you just look at them? Even get out of the car and have a quick look around. Me thinking a fella now would know, you know. Much more than a damsel in distress, you know. And he looked at my car, then he looked at me and he said, oh, baby, I don't do flat tyres. And he just beckoned the driver and the driver sped off. And I was like, what the actual, oh, I was like, what am I going to do now? That was the only car that was coming or go. And there was no way. The graveyard was too far away now to be walking home. And I was like, and then I'd have to get up in the morning and get myself to my car the next day. So I was like, so what am I going to do? So I sat in the car looking out at the graveyard and I was like, I can't be staying here either, you know. So I said, you know what? I was freezing. So I chanced my car and drove it home. And that next morning I rang. I could go up the back roads to him, a mechanic. You go up the back roads. So I rang him and I bought the car. And there was indeed, I cannot tell you what was wrong with the car. But I know he fixed it. There was something wrong with the car. But yeah, there was indeed something damaged on the car. So yeah. Don't date mechanics, ladies. Yeah, don't.
And nothing
Never,
from your man again.
Never
He didn't give a fuck.
again. He couldn't care less if I was down the bog hole or down the side of the road, and there's plenty of bogs now on my way home. Couldn't give a brass rahoo, a Scooby-Doo, what was happening to me. Like, couldn't care less. Yeah. I think once I called him out on his name. Yeah, like what I mean, to not tell someone your name, like your basic name, you know.
Well, that's another dodgy bastard there, I'd say, trying to hide stuff. Maybe there's something in the papers about him if you were to Google him.
This is it. And I have, do you know what? I do Google people that I date now. Do you know that? That's the thing I do. I was chatting to a guy and he turned out, again, the Midlands, he was a famous footballer back in the day. This young lad, younger than me, a bit younger than me. Turns out he was a famous footballer. Another fella that I dated, turns out he was in prison. Get the word? Like, yeah, it was that he was in prison.
Bit different.
Like, Google tells you a good lot for free. Like, you don't have to pay for this shit, like, you know. But yeah, no, I always Google.
Well, geez, whatever about the footballer, but like, yeah, these fellas aren't divulging serious information. Yeah. You have to find it out for yourself.
The prison bit now would have been a kind of a red flag, you know. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
And that was Tracy. We actually had to wrap it up quicker than we wanted because we were tight on time, but I don't think that's the last we've heard of her. She will be making another appearance before too long because she has a lot more to give. If you enjoyed this one, give the podcast a follow, leave a rating if you can, and send it on to your single friends. They will surely relate to at least one of Tracy's horror stories. And just in case you weren't aware, I am matchmaking people And if you want to hear how those match-made couples got on, you can listen to the bonus content on HeadStuff Plus, which is going out every second week, where I'll be following up with those couples, basically how the date went and what has happened afterwards. Are they going to see each other again, or have they been ghosted, or what has gone on? The link is in the description if you want to hear more.
This show is part of the HeadStuff Podcast Network, a hub for the creative and the curious. Shows are produced in association with HeadStuff and the Podcast Studios Dublin. Find out more or become a member at headstuffpodcasts.com.